It's a little quicker.
Yeah. You saw the XP. Yeah, we use that. Nice.
All right, so we will get started.
Yeah.
Am I okay with the audio over there?
Yep, the audio is good.
Things on?
It's Rich
Oh.
Yes, I gave it to you on.
All right. All right, so we're going to troubleshoot and do all that stuff after the presentation. I just want to get this done quickly. All right, so welcome everybody. So today's workshop will be on penetration testing, and this is intended to be an advanced course in the sense that we're going to cover some more advanced topics than we would in a basic penetration testing. So this isn't going to involve just running canned exploits where you just run it and you get a root or an administrative shell. You're going to have to do a little bit more work, and we'll go over that. We will have a lab where you will be assigned 2 systems, and the objective will be to actually compromise those systems. I have a write-up written. If you browse to that URL or that IP address, that's basically the solution for it. But that is because I want you guys to look at it, and then we'll go through it, and we'll go through the process of actually conducting a penetration test on those 2 systems, and how do you compromise those 2 systems. Some of the techniques and methods that are used are not conventional methods as far as compromising the system. So again, like I said, it's not just a simple exploit that you just run and you gain access to the system. Because in the real world, it doesn't necessarily work like that. A lot of organizations, a lot of people are always, well, we got a patch. So how can you chain together a series of issues to get the desired outcome? But first, we will talk about penetration testing. So a little bit about me. My name is Hamza. I am a pen tester, ethical hacker, red teamer, whatever you want to call it. During the day, I spend my time just hacking. So hacking networks, web applications. It can be a variety of different networks and systems. Really anything that has a computer, I had the opportunity to work on a variety of interesting networks. I am a founder of a meetup group. We meet in Virginia, so we're called Beltway Hackers. We usually meet once a month. We are on meetup if you're interested. I've consulted in both private and public sector, so I've seen a variety of different issues and good stuff in both areas. I have a bachelor's degree in IT, and I have a master's in information security and insurance / cybersecurity. So this is a very short disclaimer. What we are going to talk about today is a very tiny portion of what pen testing is. I don't want anyone to think that stuff that we covered here, that's it. This is pen testing as a whole. The idea of this is to get your feet wet so you can see what are you getting yourself into if you decide to go into a career opportunity with pen testing, or this at least opens your eyes as far as what is pen testing, because there's a lot of places out there that have really mutated it in their own organization. They call a vulnerability scan a pen test when it's not a pen test. So this can open up your eyes to see what is involved in penetration testing. And one thing to understand, pen testing is not aimlessly running around tools. If you guys are in Cali, you'll see that there are a lot of tools. There are more tools than I know of on Cali. And there's also other tools that are written by the community, by people for the community. And the idea is, as a pen tester or someone who's doing work on the offensive, you're not aimlessly running around with tools. So you're not going to just say, oh, let me just run this tool against this IP address, and you have no idea how the tool works or anything like that. The idea is to understand the tool, understand the networks, the environment, and if you do not have tools, you should be able to either write your own tool or figure out a way around that. So again, like I said, pen testing is not running an exploit for every single thing that's out there. So I'm sure many of you guys have heard MSO 867. If not, this is an exploit that was very famous a while ago in 2008 that seems to be in every training course where here, let's run MS0867 against the system and automatically we are system. Well, that's not really how it works. I don't really see MS0867 anymore, and I do actually still see it every now and then, but they usually have bigger problems. They have a holistic problem. That's why they haven't fixed MS0867. So, like I said, this is what we're covering. That red circle is what we're covering as far as pen testing. It's a huge area. There's a lot more down there. So what is pen testing? So pen testing is mimicking real-world attackers, right? So you're using the same techniques and tactics that are used in the wild to actually compromise a variety of systems, networks, and environments. Every now and then on the news you'll hear about, oh, there's this major hack, right? And that's because, you know, an attacker got into a network through some attack vector and then further went onto that network and gathered either sensitive information or did something else. So pen testing, the goal of it is to mimic real-world actions. Unfortunately, there's a lot of places that their idea of a pen test is a compliance audit. So they use it as a tool to say you're compliant, you're not compliant. I try to tell my clients, you know, we're not really here for compliance testing. We're here so you can get an idea of your network so that you can say, oh, well, you know, this is a realistic threat. Because we're not going to go in there and run a vulnerability scanner and say, oh, well, vulnerability scanner A said you have to install all these patches, you're missing all these configurations, these policies, these updates, whatever. We're going to go in there and we're going to say, well, you know, these are the attack vectors. These are the things that we can actually do. And we physically do it and we actually demonstrate it, right? So it really provides a huge impact because you're providing a customer with the overall business impact and that information so that they can move forward. So there's a variety of different pen tests. So you have your white box pen test where you have full knowledge of the network, the systems, the environment. They'll give you IP addresses. They'll give you host names. They'll give you network diagrams. They'll give you configurations. They'll give you host information, whatever you want, application information, source code, whatever it is. So you have full knowledge of the organization. Then they have black box, where you have zero knowledge of anything. They say to you, go ahead, this is our organization, and see as much information as possible that you can get. Either you can do this externally or you can do this internally. So if you're doing this across the internet, it's a different ballgame as opposed to being inside of a network. Usually inside of a network, a lot of things are more trusted. Outside of a network, you have a publicly facing website, and now what do? You have a web application that's hosted somewhere else. What are you going to do? And then there's gray box testing where you have limited knowledge of the network environment, the infrastructure, but you do have some knowledge at least. So like I said, we have internal penetration tests. So this is within the LAN, within the network. Then you have external. So this is outside of the LAN. This is across the internet. So a lot of times, you know, attacks originate from the outside. But it's very important to understand the inside, because you have to think about it what happens when that workstation, when that system is actually compromised. The attacker does not say, okay, let's go boom. The attacker says, well, now I have a foothold inside a network with a trusted device on that network. Let me go and let me see what else I can find. A lot of times you're going to find issues because you've now gone on that system and now you have access to a variety of resources within a domain. And, you know, people are very open within the network. Let's just say that. So people ask me, you know, what does it take to be a pen tester? I want to be a pen tester. I want to be a hacker, all this stuff. I don't want to be honest, you know, it's not for everybody, because I've seen a lot of people, they come into pen testing, they're like, you know, I studied cybersecurity, I want to do pen testing. And the first day on the job, they hate it. And they're just like, you know what, I quit, or I give up. Reason being is that you need to know a lot about many different things. So you have to be a jack of all trades. You have to know at least a little bit about everything, so you need to understand programming. So if I gave you an exploit that you had to actually read, you have to be able to read and actually maybe modify the exploit. And that's some of the things that we're going to do today. We're going to actually be trying to modify shellcode in a publicly available exploit, because the shellcode is not what you want to do. But you must know a variety of different, you have to know networks. So if you don't understand subnets and different networks, it's going to be hard, because you have to sit there, you have to analyze network traffic, you have to understand protocols, OS versions, variety of different things you have to understand. So my advice for people is to learn a variety of different things. So learn networking, programming, right? Web applications. So learn about a variety of web app development languages. Learning a few programming languages, please at least learn a scripting language, whether it's Python or you start doing bash scripting. It's very important. And then you can move on to low-level programming. So if you really want to do exploit development, if you want to sit in front of a debugger and start analyzing applications to see if you can find an exploit, you need to know C. It makes it a lot easier because you can read machine language essentially and understand what's happening with that particular exploit or application. And you need to know Linux and Windows at minimum. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not a Linux person, I'm just a Windows person. Well, if you want to do pen testing, I've never seen a Windows pen tester. They might exist, but have a special team only for Windows. I know some organizations will do that and say, oh, you're part of the Windows team. But if you want to be a pen tester, you at least want to give your customers the money's worth. You have to know Linux and Windows. When I say no, I don't mean using the GUI, because I could care less about the GUI. It's using the command line, because let's say you compromise a system and you get remote command and control over a system. You don't have a GUI. A lot of times you have a shell. So you need to know how to interact with the system. And in some cases you have a limited shell. You might need to break out of that limited shell and get another shell. So you're going to be working with a variety of limitations, so you have to understand how to use the command line as best as possible. Understand latest attacks and techniques and methods. It doesn't mean forget about the stuff from 1997. That's important. But please try to understand all of the latest attack techniques and methods. Stay up to date with what's going on, you know? If I asked you, hey, what happened a few months ago? What's that big issue with iOS or whatever? You should be able to at least, you know, knowledgeably speak about it, because you need to know about all these things, because when you get onto a network, you have to be able to look at that information and say, hey, this looks familiar, you know, we can use this, because when you're on an engagement or on a pen test, you have very limited time. So you don't have the entire year to start exploiting systems or doing whatever you want. The attackers, they have all year, they have many years maybe. You know, they can do whatever they want, whenever they want. But it's really, you have to have that willingness to really learn. So even if you're off, I know some people are like, well, I've been working 9 to 5, and, well, I don't want to go home and start programming or do whatever. And I tell them, well, okay, that might be all right, but there's always something you have to learn. There's always something you have to do. A lot of times I'm spending my free time doing stuff like this. That doesn't mean don't have free time. It means you have to understand this isn't the type of job that you can just go home and say that's it. You forget about everything else. So you have to be dedicated. You could do that, but that doesn't mean you're going to be the best pen tester, or you're going to be a very good pen tester. There might be a company that will hire you, but then again, you have to be realistic with yourself, your skills and expectations. A lot of people get into this. They get into it because they like it. I know some other people who decide to get into it just for the money. Those are usually the people who are not as successful because they're going into it for the wrong reasons. That's kind of backwards, going to it for money. So please, I really hope you enjoy it and you want to go into it because you like security. And, you know, there's nothing better than explaining your findings to, like, a CIO or a CISO, right? And really changing the way they think. And then they say, oh, my gosh, we've been doing things the wrong way. Our policies and procedures are worthless because you were able to compromise our entire domain. So we're going to start changing a few things. Or they might say, well, you know what? Because of the issues we found, now we're going to spend more money on IT because, you know, they keep talking about, oh, they got to get these new servers, they got to upgrade their OS. You know, they're running Server 2003, and no one wants to pay for an upgrade. Well, now you have that ammunition to say, hey, we really need to upgrade because now the management really understands the issue, and if not, they're at least taking risks, and they're putting their reputation on the line and saying, well, if something happens, yeah, you know, they told us, but, you know, now I'm aware of this, right? And then other times you're just used as a compliance auditor, like I said, just to check something off. Those places are usually stay away from, but they're all over federal government and all these other places, so it's kind of hard to stay away. But there are a lot of people out there that want a pure, real pen test. All right, so what makes this advanced? You might ask. I kind of went over it in the beginning. You know, we're moving away from the basic stuff, so hopefully everybody can follow me. If you get lost at any time I'm speaking, don't worry. That's normal. A lot of you will get lost. A lot of you guys will not know what I'm talking about. That's pretty normal. There's a lot of information. There's too much information. There isn't enough time, and it's really hard to give that background information. So if I say run a particular command, and you don't know what I ran, whether it's in Linux or Windows, make a note of it and research it on your own time. It really will help you out. A lot of this stuff is, you know, once you know the command line, once you know these commands, it's not that bad. But in the beginning, it can be very intimidating and overwhelming. So we will work harder to get a shell. So the two examples that I have, we have to work hard to get a shell. And it means doing a series of things to the system to get access to it. And then the shell that we get might be low level. So it might be a limited user that can't do anything on that system. So how do we then get a higher coverage shell, right? How do we do that? It's very important. So we're going to chain together a series of issues. So during penetration testing, I might see one problem, and then I see another problem, and then I see a third problem. Some people might say, well, these are three different problems. I might see it and say, oh, these are three unique problems that I can chain together to get what I want. There have been situations where, you know, we either have limited access or we have no access, and we figure out a variety of different issues on the network, and we use all of that together to get what we want, and eventually we might get access. We're going to modify exploits. I mentioned this already. Publicly available exploits. So there's going to be a lot of exploits you find on the internet. People who create the exploit create it to demonstrate there's an issue, but they also create it in a way that it isn't friendly to script kids. You can't just download the code and expect to run it and it's going to work. A lot of times you'll download the code and you'll try to compile it, and bam, it does not work. Or something random happens, and you need to troubleshoot that code, and you need to say, okay, why isn't it working? What can I do? What changes do I need to make to it? Shell code is an important thing. So with shell code, a lot of times an exploit is going to open up calculator or notepad.exe to demonstrate that it is vulnerable, right? So it will spawn, it will run the exploit, it will exploit whatever process or situation, and then it's going to open up calculator. But it's going to open up calculator as administrator. For you, what are you going to do with that? You have a reverse shell on the system, so you have remote access to that system, and it opened up a calculator.exe. What in the world are you going to do with that? And we will see what we can do to change that type of behavior. We're going to work with a variety of operating systems. So I have a Linux and I have a Windows system for you guys. The idea is to play with it and to get an understanding and programming. So we're going to be looking at Python code. We're going to be looking at a variety of different code. We're going to be interacting with PHP. These are different languages that you have to understand and get feel for. All right, so understand this. I think everyone by now might be able to understand this based on what I said. Pen testing is not easy. I know many people who work at pen test, we call them pen test puppy mills, and these are pen test companies that just go and they bid really cheap, and they say, we're going to do a pen test for your organization. And they hand you a vulnerability report, and their vulnerability scanners scan these systems, and then here's our scan report. You know, you have all these issues. You got to patch all these systems. And then you might be asking, well, okay, like, well, why do I have, well, our vulnerability scanner said we're missing the update, and it's critical. It's red. right? And management's going to be like, oh my God, it's red. And everybody's going to start running around with their head cut off, and they're going to start screaming, it's red, we got to make it purple. And that's not appropriate, you know. You have to be able to tell the customer, well, you're missing this patch, which leads to this, which allowed me to gain access to your customer database, which I then control this, and then I got onto your second subject. That's more important because then they can know where to fix that. It will become frustrating. You will want to bash your head into the wall because you're staring in front of the computer for hours and hours. I've worked like 15-hour days on an engagement because we're just in it. We're trying to figure out the network. We might be working with 5 systems. We might be working with 1,000 systems. Right? We have to know what we're doing. It will be very frustrating. There are many ways to accomplish a single task. I might be able to run a command to do X, Y, and Z, but somebody else might be able to do something else. So everybody has a very unique take on it, and there's something different everyone can do. So I don't want you guys to think, well, I can only do this, so I may not be that great. Well, you might have a different take on it, and that's the thing with PenTesting is it's an art. I've seen people, you know, exploit the same machine, the same system, a different way than I did, and I say, oh my God, I didn't realize you could have done this instead of what I did. I mean, yes, it's the same attack vector, but they use it in a different manner. Let me give you guys an example. There are cases where I might get on the system, and I might then have, you know, I might execute a particular binary. I might need to upload a file onto a share and then execute it from the share, or execute code in memory, and then someone else might just write straight to the file system. There's different ways to do the same thing. And an important thing is, please, if you have any of these fancy certs, please forget about all of that. You know, I don't care if you have a 4-letter cert or you have a plus at the end of the cert, whatever it is, if it's DOD 8570 or whatever, it does not matter. All those certs, honestly, are not going to help you at all. And that's my honest opinion because they're good foundational knowledge, but you're not going to, that does not make you a successful pen tester. I've seen many people, they say to me, oh, should I get my, 4-letter certification? I can be a pen tester. Like, no, it gives you good foundational knowledge, but you're not going to be a pen tester, that's all. So all these overly abused certifications are not going to help you. That doesn't mean don't get it. That means just be aware of it, because I get some people that come up to me and they're like, well, I have mine, blah, blah, blah. I can do all this. Like, that's not how any of this works, right? This is not a competition or anything like that. There will be a lot you need to learn and know. And then, the moral of the story is never give up. I've known many people that have given up, and they say, you know what, I'm going to go into a different career path. That's okay. Pen testing isn't for you. This is just to get you exposed to what pen testing is, because you might like it. You might hate it. If you hate it, it's not a problem. There's many different things that you can do. Me personally, I love the offensive side, because part of the reason is that, when I watch the news and I hear all these articles, all this stuff, and I just start laughing because I'm like, well, that's not how that happens. When they talk about all this great big hack, well, it's not a hack. So it opens up your eyes, really, to what is actually possible and what's not possible. So, yes, don't give up. Giving up is bad. If you want to give up, that's okay, but I'm really saying please don't give up. So this is a very simplified pen testing process that I, come up with based on my experience. It doesn't mean this is the pen testing process. This isn't the grapevine of pen testing, process or anything like that. This is what we are doing. So usually you have your pre-engagement activities. This is as many meetings as it takes for the customer to really be comfortable with the idea, or as many meetings as they want. So initially you'll have a few meetings with the customer, whoever that customer is, whoever that person's role is in the company, and you'll discuss what you're going to do, how you're going what you're going to do, and what is the overall objective. And that can involve any type of intelligence analysis or threat analysis or mimicking any specific type of threats. So it might want a particular type of test specifically focused on maybe their endpoint system, because they're worried that an employee is going to open up an attachment, so they want to see, are their endpoint defenses actually working? Can you bypass all the fancy products that the companies purchase, all of the million-dollar equipment? Can you bypass it? And I'll tell you, there are many methods of bypassing. All AV, to me now, AV is worthless. I don't even use AV on my computer because I know exactly how easy it is to bypass AV. I've done it many times in organizations that have antivirus. So I say, man, I'm not going to buy AV at this point because it's just a waste of your money. It's good, but if you're more cautious as far as what you're doing, you should be okay. And now most newer operating systems come built in with like Windows Defender, which is adequate. Because if you got something that Windows Defender can't catch, you're either being targeted or it's a bigger issue. So after we talk to the stakeholders, we get permissions, we get all the fancy documents signed, because there's a lot of risk involved in what we're doing. You have to protect yourself because there are a lot of times that something else has happened that's not related to us. And they come up to us and they say, you guys took down our network. And I'm like, okay, what's the subnet? What's the IP address? And they give me the IP address. I'm like, we're not even on that network. We're on a completely separate network. And you're talking about this other satellite network. How do we take it down? So a lot of times we'll do full packet capture. So we'll be logging all packets coming in and out of our interface so that we can tell the customer if something happens, we can show them, look, what we did not harm your network. And a lot of times, we don't do anything to take down networks. That doesn't happen, because you have to understand the tools, you have to understand the process, and that's why I said it's important to know about the tools, because if you don't know how to use the tool, you're going to be in for a big treat, because you're going to see with all these tools, there's a million commands and options and flags, and if you use the incorrect ones, I don't know, it might do something that you're not intending on doing. After that is one of the very important things. I think it's the most important, reconnaissance. The more you know, the better off you will be. The more I know about a particular target, the better I can be to gather as much information and figure out how do I attack that system, that network, or anything else. So enumeration, information gathering, intelligence analysis, all of this stuff means, gathering a whole bunch of data. And the way you get that data can be, there's different ways. So packet capture, browsing to a particular site, seeing what has particular ports open. Are there any shares? Are there Samba shares, NFS? Is there SMB on the network? Where's the domain controller? How many domain controllers? What's DNS? All these different things. Can you gather information from all these services? Can you start doing banner grabbing? So can you figure out what version of software? Are there printers on the network? A lot of printers that give out decent information. Are there network protocols that are running around that you can enumerate information? Because networks are designed to be very easy a lot of times. And even networks that are compliance-driven, where you have to run this thing that hardens your system, sometimes those scripts and stuff can be left around in a share that you can go to, and you can read what the SNMP community string was changed to. So then you can start enumerating the network. So don't forget about all these different things, regardless of what kind of network, and they say this is the most secure network. It was done by humans. Humans make mistakes. Try to find those mistakes. And it's not just to take advantage of it, but it's to show, the organization, well, these are some issues, just fix it. You need to fix this. And it's not to blame anyone, it's to show, it's just like if you write a paper and you get proofread. You're proofreading it because you may not be able to pick up those mistakes. The same thing with these networks. Someone designs it, someone builds it, and then some team is in charge of updating it maybe. Unless you're a one-stop shop where you are the help desk, you're the security analyst, you're the network engineer, you're the developer. Those are the most fun networks. But regardless of that, you have to be aware of all the information. Vulnerability analysis, you have to understand what systems, what networks, what operating systems. Is this XP? I hope it's not XP. Is this Windows 7? Is it 10? Is it 8? Is it 8.1? What patch level is it? Service pack 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Windows 7, what service pack does it go up to? Different things, right? Linux, oh my God. what kernel level is it, right? So what kernel version is it at? You know, what's the release? These are all different things that you have to be aware of. There isn't like 5 different Linux distributions. There are many. And then you're in an organization, you got CentOS, you got Red Hat, you got Red Hat Enterprise, you have Debian, Ubuntu, all this. So you have to be aware. Exploitation is important. Okay, you figured out all these different techniques and methods, and you're like, all right, I got something good. All right, I'm ready. You exploit it. Bam, it worked. Or, bam, it did not work. So let me give you guys an example. I had a situation where there was this web application that was vulnerable to command injection, where I can pass commands into this web application in a certain field. I shouldn't be able to, but I can pass commands, and then the operating system will interpret those commands as operating system commands. So I'm like, great. Now I'm gonna run a command to tell that operating system to download a remote file from a web server that I'm hosting, download the file, and then execute the file, and then I should be able to get a shell. Well, I tried that. I didn't get the shell. I didn't get anything. So I said, let me try to figure out what's going on. I started running TCP dump, which captures your network traffic, and I said, well, for me to determine if this exploit is actually working, if this issue, or if my syntax is correct, I'm going to run the command to ping my system, and then I'm going to look for any packets that are coming to my IP address. So I do that, and I don't get anything back, which means it's not running the OS system command. So then I started tweaking around with my syntax, and I finally got it correct because I started seeing ICMP requests and everything. So I was pinging myself from the other system, right? So I was seeing those packets. So I said, great, now it's going to work. I went back, I did everything, bam, I got a shell. So it's part of that troubleshooting process where the first time it's not going to work. You got to use all your tools and your knowledge to figure out how am I going to do it. So if you know nothing about networks, that would have been hard. Because how do you start interacting with 2 separate systems if you don't know, what if you're on a different subnet or whatever, And let's not even talk about pivoting between networks, right? Because that can be, you compromise the system, there's a second network interface, and you can go on to a second network. So you can do things like SSH tunnels, variety of different things. But that's the importance of exploitation, right? And then you get in, and now let's say I got in, and I am not admin. I am not root, I'm not admin, I'm not system, I'm not domain admin, I'm not anyone important. I'm just a little guy. I'm a www-data. That's the user account for a web service in Linux. And you have very limited commands. You can barely do anything that's important to you. So what do you got to do? Go back to enumeration. Now you're on the system. Before you were not on the system. Now you're on the system. So start enumerating that target and gather as much information as possible about that system. A lot of commands you can run. So if you start learning about Linux and Windows commands, you will figure out that they're very helpful. I can type in net user and see all the user accounts listed on a Windows computer. I can type in, netstat, and I can look at network connection information. I can type in EIR. I can look at directory listings of the operating system. So very useful stuff. You never know what you're going to find. There have been some times that I'll look around. I'll look around for whatever it is. And sometimes I've been surprised with the tree. I go looking around, and I start seeing passwords.xls. I start seeing, usernames. It's always, the name of the file is always password. That's what it always is, like passwords or password. And I'm like, man, or I see any Excel document, I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And a lot of times what I will do is I don't care about the title of it because someone could be sneaking and say, I'm going to name this dog, right? Dog.xls. Maybe not dog, but it might be like invoice.xls, and I might overlook it. So what I'll do is I'll start searching inside of files for the word password. Because I guarantee you there's a title or something, or pass, P-A-S, or P-A-S-S. And I'll search the entire system for all files containing pass inside of the file. If you're on Linux, many ways to do that. Many ways. You can use grep, you can use sed, you can use everything. You can start going through. And if you're not on Linux, that's okay. Windows can do the same thing, and you can start grepping for files that are inside of a particular file. So it's important. And you never know, you might find something that can lead you to a higher privilege. There was one case where It was actually very easy. I got on it. I wasn't thinking that this was going to be on there. The password XLS, I opened it up. I said, wow, there's this Excel document. And I look at it and I was like, oh my goodness. Literally, the person made it so easy. They have the host name, they have they have the DNS name, they have the IP address of all these servers, and they have all the user account information, the domain administrator, whatever. I said, okay, let me start using this. I started using it, logging into different things, logging into different devices. Then we showed them, we said, look, it's not a good idea. So this showed them how bad of an idea that was. So then they were able to invest money into a real password management system, because part of the admin said, well, the reason I'm using this Excel document is because when I told my management problem, and they don't want to buy the password management. They say that's just extra overhead.
So maybe you rename it for the page.
Yeah, renaming doesn't work.
No, but I mean, before you came, you made sure it was.
Yeah, I've had situations. Yeah, oh, maybe. But I've had situations where, before we come, people, the IT administrators, right, they're afraid that they're going to get fired because of it. It's not how we're operating. And even if their management is very nice, they're still afraid of it. So they'll update all these systems, and then we'll get on there. And we can look at the dates that these updates were installed. And I'm like, okay, you installed these updates yesterday, right? Or, I get it. So a funny story, I got access to it. We got an admin's password, right? We got his password through through a different attack vector, right? So we got his password. We tried logging in the system. Password didn't work the first time. We tried the second time, it did not work. And then we said, all right, we're not going to lock out this account. We said, this password is not working. What could have happened? So then we said, this has to be a recent password. So then we said, okay, this guy must have changed his password before we arrived. So we incremented the last number because people love incrementing. We got in. So we got in, we used his password, and this guy was like, oh, I changed my password. That's the old password. It's like, yeah, we found your old password, but you're incrementing. So it's not that hard, right? So you have to have it. Privilege escalation, privilege post-exploitation is just as important as the initial enumeration. You get on the system, dump whatever you can. You are administrator now. Dump all the information you can, because there's something that could lead you in a different direction. Because if you're conducting a pen test and you get as far as, you compromise a couple of servers, right? And that's all you do. And there's a whole network. Well, you're going to go to your customer and say, well, these systems you have to worry about, everything else is fine. Well, a lot of times, based on information you find from the first system, it leads you to other systems that then you discover other issues, and you start hopping around all over. There have been times where, oh my goodness, we look at how many command sessions we got. We got so many command sessions that I can't even keep track of these systems. We're on 120 systems because we got a credentials that then allow us to remotely connect to all systems in the domain. And we're on 100 systems, and we have remote access, and we're just like, oh my God, these are too many shells. And there was one situation where we kicked off the process, and we said, let's go to lunch. And we came back, and oh my God, the screen was full of shells. And we were on all these systems in the environment, and we just went to lunch. We came back, and the guy's like, oh. One of the guys wanted to know what was our progress. I was like, well, we went to lunch, we're back. And we got a couple of shells. It's like, the reason we're able to do all that is because organizations follow very bizarre processes and methods. You'll have an administrative account that works on all computers so that the help desk can install software. Well, if help desk can install software, I can install software too. It's not the software that you want. I'm going to start running binaries or PSExec, which is a classic 1999 attack vector that for some reason still works, right? But yeah, and then reporting. A lot of people I talk to don't like reporting. What do you do? We don't use a template or anything. We write it ourselves, so we've created our own template.
No, but I mean, you just use Word or?
Oh yeah, we'll use Word because it's if we send a report to someone, they can easily open it because they have Word. Sometimes we're stuck in environments where we can't use Word, and we have to use LibreOffice, which is the worst. So we are stuck in an environment where we can't use Word. We have to use LibreOffice, and the report looks so bad. But they understand because they don't have Word on any systems, right? So or I can't, necessarily bring my own system in. So reporting, write that report. People hate it, but don't be one of those lazy people that write a report that's just so bad. I've met many technical folks that are the worst writers, and they give this to me, and I'm reading it, and they're like, we compromised the system and we got shell. What does that mean? It's Chinese, right? Because they don't know what shell is. The compromise is a very vague term. You have to be very detailed. So a lot of times I'm very specific. I don't say, I say we got a shell which gives us remote access to a computer. Like I spell it out because there might be executives that are going to read this. They don't have time to be reading all your technical nonsense. And they might give the report to the technical guy, like, here, read this, give me a summary. So in the beginning, we'll have a executive summary where we quickly summarize what we did. We don't talk about technical stuff. We talk about the general, what's the overall impact? What did we do and how we accomplished it, but not the technical details. That's going to be in the later section where we specify all of the techniques, all of the methods, everything. And this is intended for the technical staff. I should be able to give this to the sysadmin, and he reads it, and he's like, all right, I understand. Because if I start giving you CVE numbers, as a manager, you're like CVE 2016-1521, what is that, right? That's not helpful. So first step, enumeration, pre-engagement, right? So meeting with stakeholders, define the scope. There's something called scope. A lot of times there's some customers that want to limit what you're trying to do, and they're like, you can't touch this IP address, you can't touch this, you can't touch this. Here, I just want you to test this one system. And we're like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Why? And they're just afraid. They're afraid that we're going to knock something over, even though we've never knocked anything down. You know what you're doing, you're not going to knock it over. If you don't know what you're doing and you're just wanting tools, yeah, maybe. But a lot of networks nowadays are not that bad. And if you're testing a network that's that bad, they have other problems and it's not going to understand what the client is asking for. A lot of times I've seen pen tests where the person, like there's this, they send a sales guy or something. He's like, oh, we'll do a pen test for it. He doesn't know anything technical. And he sells them a rabbit, right? And they want like an elephant. And you come in and start talking to them and you're like, what's going, why are we doing X, Y, and Z? Well, it's because the customer may not really know how to explain what they want, and you as a technical person need to understand and say, oh, well, you're looking for this type of assessment, or your network is this large, because a lot of times they'll come to say, yeah, we want you to do a pen test. All right. Yeah, can you do it like tomorrow? And it just takes like 2 days, just run your scan. I'm like, no. How many devices do you have? What's your network? What's your range? Is this internal? Is it external? Are there web apps involved? Web apps are a different beast. Like, those are huge. Because you have very complicated systems that you have to interact with. So you have to do all of this. So you need to understand what is the customer asking for, determine specific threats and threat modeling. So what is the customer worried about? Is this a hospital that, for some crazy reason, they're worried about ransomware, right? Ransomware. I don't know why everybody's talking about ransomware now, because if it's a new thing, it's been around for a while. I just don't get it. Our conference is talking about ransomware. This has been around for at least 4 years. It's been around longer than that. But are they asking for, to see, are they vulnerable to like ransomware? What are they asking for? And then, determine the specific threat. So determine what is that threat that they're looking, that they're trying to protect themselves against, and what defenses do they have so that you can circumvent those defenses and go forward. Enumeration. You get your little goggles on and you're looking around. Know as much as possible about the target. I've said this before. You need to know more about the machines than the admin. I've been on systems that I know way more about it than the system owners, because there are times when we go to the system owners and we say, hey, can you get, okay, we're going to do white box testing where you give us all information. That's what they want, right? But then when you ask them, can you give me the IP addresses? They're like, I don't know. There have been situations they don't know the IP addresses, or it's a new guy who got pushed into this position, or he's a developer. He's not an admin, but the manager is just sent him there, right? So you need to be able to get all that information from them, because there have been situations where we're like, all right, we get it. You don't know anything about this stuff. Yes, we get it. It's like, how are you guys going to do the test? It's all right. The first day, we start enumerating. We're like, oh, by the way, you have this machine on your network, I think you should look at it. It's like, oh, I didn't even know the system was on there yet. So we start enumerating network and try to see what's on there. Active means you are actively interacting with devices and systems. Passive means you are not interacting with this stuff. So I'm doing Google hacking, right? So I'm searching a website that's very, very revealing, that gives you, here's the names of all our CIOs, here's this. Then you say, oh, let me go to LinkedIn. Oh, okay. And you start finding out all this information about this person because everybody's very open about everything they do. Some are too open where they're talking about specific things within the organization. Oh, managed VMware ESXi version 5.6. Great, great. So they're running version 5.6 of ESXi. So let me brush up and figure out, have there been any publicly available exploits? Are there any issues, right? Social engineering, everything I talked about. Email harvesting, get as many email addresses as possible. Who is, so DNS. DNS is very helpful if it's not configured correctly. You can get information about the internal network. And there's lots of tools to get the job done. Like I said, you need to be able to build your own network. Many people I know that you take away the tools from them. It's like, go ahead, operate. And they're just like, what are you talking about? I need my fancy tool created by the following government agency to operate. I don't have it. I can't do anything. It's like, all right, you're not really doing PenTesting. You're not hacking, right? Because hacking is finding creative techniques and methods, regardless of the situation. If I give you a stick and you can hack something, it means you use the creative way, you use the stick in a creative manner, or you had no stick and you made a stick, or you made whatever out of it, whatever you want. That's what it is. Vulnerability analysis, examine all targeted information, determine what will you go after first. Are you going to go after the easy or the hard? Low-hanging fruit or the hard stuff? It doesn't matter what you do first. There have been times where I'm like, I want to look at this hard problem, and I'm stuck on it for 3 days. By day 6 or 5, we're done. We got to get on the plane and leave, right? So by day 4, I'm like, yes, I got it, right? And it's like, everybody's all excited. It's like, finally, I figured out this issue, right? So are you going to go after the easy stuff or the hard stuff? You might find easy stuff on the network. Like I said, maybe you found a username and password under the keyboard. This happened seriously. I was joking with my coworker. I was like, oh, it'd be so funny if we found like a sticky note on his keyboard. I flip it, and there literally is a sticky note. And then the manager, he walks by, and then we're like, we found a sticky note. And then the sysadmin is nearby. He tells him, hey, I thought I told you to take it away. And I was like, oh, my God. So the manager knew about the sticky note on the keyboard. It's weird. I cannot believe that happened, but it actually. Research. There's a lot you don't know, so research. Verify that there are no unintended consequences. So a particular exploit might reboot the machine. You need to be aware of that. You might lock out accounts if you're brute forcing. You need to. So if I'm brute forcing, I know what the password policy. I try to find out the password policy. I don't mean asking them. I mean enumerating off the network. A lot of Windows domains are very squeaky. If you start asking the domain controller what's the password policy, it will spit out the password policy. It'll say 8 characters, locked out after 3 incorrect attempts, a 15-minute lockout. That's normal because that's how the Windows domain actually works. It has to be very, it has to tell all these systems all this information. It has to leak information, essentially. I love it. Because now I'm on a brute force, but after 2 attempts, I'm going to stop. I'm going to wait 15 minutes. I'm going to go back. So you can script this out. How effective is it? Will you be able to get a password? Maybe if you're lucky. If you're not, you may not. But you just let that run in the background and you go for other stuff. And please don't be that person that causes denial of service. I luckily don't know anyone. I've heard of these people. They crack. Because like I went on an engagement before and they're like, please, don't crash our system. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We haven't even touched anything. And this guy is like, this admin is about to cry. And I'm like, are you okay? And he's very emotional. And he's like, this other company came in and they crashed the systems. And his manager was so mad at him. He almost got fired. I'm like, okay, we're going to be extra careful with your environment because we understand the situation. And the guy said, please, I need this job. I'm like, we're not going to crash anything. But if we feel like we will, we're going to go to you and we're going to say, is this okay? Before we do anything. And he's okay. Exploitation, my favorite part was once you get that little hole into that fence and you're right through it, right? So exploit any discovered vulnerabilities. So this can be public exploits, right? We've talked about those. There are many places that have them. Be very careful what you download, where you download it from. There's a lot of forums out there that say, hey, I have a new publicly available exploit for IIS. Here, run this on your machine. Or they give you a precompiled binary. I say, no, anything precompiled. Because you run that executable and it formats your drive. There's a lot of Linux exploits out there that they're intended for script kiddies to download, so their drive can get formatted. So you execute the shell of the script, it starts formatting. It's like, no. And if you decide to do that, let's say you want to be, you want to be a rebel tonight. All right, do it in a VM, preferably not on your computer, right? So be a rebel and do that, but don't trust that. And please, if you do that, don't take it to a customer and then start leaving stuff that you just randomly downloaded from the internet. Download it from reputable sources. For example, Exploit Database is a reputable source where security researchers and different people contribute and create. Those are verified. Those are clean. Those are good. Don't use, .ru for anything. Configuration issues. I have seen fully patched systems are 100% patched. They are perfect, but there's configuration problems. We will see today when we start doing a few things, you'll see configuration problems and what that can lead to. Weak usernames and passwords, for some reason, people still have, not necessarily for their account, but for like web services that are up there. A printer might have a default username and password, and you might be able to log into it. Maybe a switch, who knows? I might have a default username and password on that switch. No, I don't, but I've seen that happen before, that things are not properly segregated where you can access that device. No one tried to access this, you definitely can't. But there's that. There's a weak username and password. There's service abuse. There are times where there's a particular service that I could modify. Why I should have the permissions to modify, I don't know. But like a regular user might have the permission to modify, and way more. Yeah, these are just a few things. When I say service abuse, huge area. So many different things. Privilege escalation. You see the elevators. Your goal is to go all the way up there. Right now, you're here on the floor somewhere. You've successfully exploited a system. You have limited username, user access. What do? You need to escalate to admin. So real life situations, right? So all these hacks or whatever you want to call it. I'm pretty sure that the attackers, they get onto the network and they did not have admin privileges. Or maybe they did, but let's say they did not have admin privileges. Well, how in the world could they siphon off credit card numbers? They need to elevate privileges, because once they elevate privileges, they are running on that local system as admin, which means they can install software. So unfortunately, there's a lot of kiosks, right? Fancy credit card terminals and kiosk machines that are running Windows on the system. And it's hard to manage Windows in a domain where every machine is connected to each other, and you can easily push updates, WSUS or whatever you want. Well, you have these point-of-sale terminals that people are always using at retail establishments. How easy do you think those things are to patch? And some of you guys have worked in retail and have seen how horrible those point-of-sale systems are, especially if it's running Windows. People don't want to break it up, so they don't really patch. So then you have a variety of issues, or the point-of-sale terminal is very chatty with another system. So they get on the network, they enumerate, elevate privileges, then start planning malware, and start stealing credit card information, and then let's use your infrastructure to then start sending data out. And it's just like, wow, you opened up a share on my network and you start sending data out, or you put up a web server in my network and somehow now people can remotely access it, or you set up SSH. What's going on, right? So privilege escalation, I just want to warn you, is very hard. There have been systems I've gotten on, I'm like, good job, guys. You guys really hardened this system, because I'm in there. I can't run anything. I can't even run like IP config, if config. I don't even know what my IP address is. I just have a stupid little dollar sign, and I'm just like, okay, I'm staring at this, and I run a command, so sorry, not allowed. not allowed, not allowed. You say, okay, what's allowed? Shut down. So, okay. So I can't do anything. But there have been other times where I've gotten the limited shell, and I'm like, okay, how's it using? It's using. A lot of companies will do this. They'll get Linux, and then they'll modify Linux kernel, right? And they'll modify it, and they'll put it embedded into some device, a switch or whatever it is, right? Then you get on there, you're like, it looks like Linux. Well, it's not Linux. It's some bootleg operating system, right? That this company has created. And then you figure out there's a way for you to break out of that shell and get an actual real shell. So you're like, all right, great, bam, you got a real shell. Now you're using that router as like a Linux operating system machine. People are like, how are you using this router as a computer? Well, I got waves. But I'm just saying, there are weird devices out there that might be running the operating system. But you might have to break out of it, and then that allows you to elevate privileges. Because if you broke out, most likely, you might be running a root. Try to run some root commands. Do cat etc/shadow. That will show you the hacks in the system. So there's a lot of creative ways to escalate privileges. You can maybe modify a service, and instead that service runs as NTFR system. You drop a binary in there, and restart the service. The next time that service starts, so next time Internet Explorer or whatever service starts, it runs the binary, but it runs it with NT authority privileges because that's what that service runs. And now you got a shell, and you're like, yes, I'm NT authority, which is the highest level on Windows. You can be admin, you can be NT authority system. You are up there. This is PostExploitation. So PostExploitation, get all that data, get all the files, everything off of there. Be very cautious as far as what you're getting. There have been times that I get onto a system, right, and I discover that I don't know if this person's actually doing work, right? And I'm like, I have a lot of stuff on here. I mean, we're not digging through people's stuff. We're trying to do exactly what attackers are doing, right? And we don't see the actual files. We just see like the names of these files or what type of extension. It's like you have 1,000,001 pictures on your thing. You have videos and movie titles and stuff, and it's just like, well, I don't think you're supposed to be watching all these movies at work, right? So you'll run into situations like that where it's like, what do you do when you come onto a situation where I found 1,000 videos on somebody's account? You know, is that something that you can report? Well, the rules of engagement will dictate everything that you can and can't do. So if you can't go dig into files, then they'll tell you that. But normally they're like, go ahead, dig through anything you want. It's all open, it's fair game, right? Because you've gotten permission from the customer. If you don't have permission, you can end up in jail. So please get permission, get a signed letter from the CEO or CISO or whoever is the head person in charge, because there's a lot of useful data, but forget the stuff that people just leave on their computer. But I found, information like passwords, usernames, scripts. There was one situation where I did not understand. There was a file. This file was encrypted. You know, they say encrypt your files. Great, right? So the guy encrypted his password. But next to it was another file that says it was like encryptor.sh, and .sh is a shell script. So it was a shell script he would run to encrypt a certain directory from a remote system and create that file. And I read the shell script, and it's like, it has a bunch of code, and in the code it has the password to use to encrypt. And I was like, oh man, let me take a copy of that password. All right. Decrypt. All right, I got. Guess what I found? Again, passwords. Yeah, passwords and backups and like hashes and all this like development stuff and passwords for databases and all this stuff. And we told the guy, yes, they tell you to encrypt, but don't store that in the same encryption, or we get onto a system and we love SSH keys. And we find out people have, they have SSH enabled. So I'm like, all right, let me put in my public key, and now I can remotely connect to other systems that system is trusted. Or let me get your private key and use your private key to start logging into the system. So variety of different ways. PostExploitation is important. Dump password hashes. On a Windows environment, you can dump password hashes. This can then be used to authenticate against other remote systems. Because back in the day, Windows is very nice. And if you told Windows, hey, I don't have the password, but I got the hash, Windows would say, oh, that's okay, log in. So you don't have to crack the password, you just pass the hash. So that's good. Passwords in memory. Now that issue has been patched, there's a lot of people that are running Windows 7 that don't have that patch, where you can scrape off passwords from memory. It's all floating around in clear text. Because of the way LSAS works, with Windows 10, they fixed it. Now you have to actually make a registry change in order to get that to work on the Windows 8.1 and Windows 10. But it's the way, local security, authoritative subsystem works. User accounts, so what user accounts are on there, sensitive data. Next that I already talked about, network connections, understand the network, the environment, what is going on in the network. It's very important. And the part we all hate, reporting. Report all identified and exploitable issues. Do not report, oh, my vuln scanner said blah, blah, blah. You can if you want, or if your company tells you to. I can't control that, but I highly suggest don't do that, please, because, people who actually like doing this type of work look at that and they're like, oh my God. Like, I've read other companies or people's pen test reports, and I'm like, if it was for me, you did a pen test, I would say, I did not get my money's worth. Give them their money's worth. Provide recommendations for resolving. You're not only identifying the issue. As a technical person, you may not be a subject matter expert with a particular technology, but you should be able to guide them in the right direction. Say, well, I'm not an expert, but this is how I would do it. But you have to test it because it might break something that you already have running if you fix a particular issue. So you'll have to test it. But this is my recommendation. And please do not give these generic canned recommendations that's out there. Oh, your password has to be 8 characters, 1 upper, 1 lower. That doesn't help. Be very detailed and provide that technical summary and detailed write-up for the staff. So I try to walk through exactly what I did. So if you guys look at that little answer sheet walkthrough, that's kind of similar to what a penetration test report, I hope, would end up looking like, where you have screenshots and detailed information as far as how you did it. Because if another technical person comes, they should be able to replicate it based on the information you provide. And again, reporting, unfortunately, relies on the organization because there's some places, let's say you become a pen tester, you work for either private or government, you can't go in there and start saying, oh, I'm going to change your reporting. You just have to deal with whatever way they report. If they report in a really bad way, that's okay. Start reporting in a bad way. Understand what you're doing is bad and make a plan to leave eventually if you don't like that organization or the way they operate. So reporting depends on the organization. And sometimes even the client. I've seen some clients that are like, oh, I want you to put this in the first. I'm like, doesn't make any logical sense. Why am I just put it in the first paragraph? All right, I put it in the first. It makes no sense. And he takes that report to some managers. Look at this. All right, I don't know what you guys are doing over there. So that's it. No, that's not it. All right. So common security issues. So what have I seen? Excessive services. So there are a lot of chatty services that are out there. Outdated operating systems. I have, I think a few weeks ago I saw Windows Server 2000. I was so bad because I was trying to run commands and certain things was not working. It was like, this command is appreciated. Oh, XP is still out there. And it's just like, why? It's like, well, we've been using this for 20 years and we just can't upgrade. It's like, well, I see when Windows 7 came around, you never upgraded. And now we're all the way at Windows 10, you still haven't upgraded. It's like, I have no hope for it. And I saw one day, I saw a Windows 95 system. And I was like, but they tried very hard to segregate the system, but they didn't do a very good job. It was still on the network. And then I told them there's this 95. I said, it should not be on the domain. And they're like, you're right. I thought we took it off. And they're like, no. And I was like, can I see the system? And so the guy, he took me to where they have it, and it was the most pathetic looking system because it was like this tiny little box. It's all the way in the corner, right? That looked like it was about to fall over. And he was like, we walked in there, and he was like, be very careful. And I'm like, what? Like, even, there have been times where it shuts off. And like, somebody walks near it or whatever. Okay, so we stood far away. He's like, that's the 9-5 machine. And it's like, all right, okay, but you're going to see that, and your job is to, they may not be able to patch, but they can do something else. Because they might have a customer who requires them to use it for a particular task that customer has things that are in other places that are maybe running that type of operating system, or, usually it's because of the customer, whoever that is.
Sometimes the software that they're running on
Exactly.
does not exist for any other version.
Right. Exactly. Or the manufacturer has gone out of business and it's being used for like very important things out there. But it scares me because I go there and I say, oh God, you're telling me this is the same thing that's somewhere else? Yes. Okay, all right. But it opens up your eyes, right? Because then at least you can tell them, well, you shouldn't put on your network. Because they're like, that's okay. We'll put a keyboard and monitor here, and you don't have to, you can't even log in, but you can access that device.
Are you seeing more and more of the IoT stuff since that's the big deal right now with the...
Yeah, I see, bizarre IoT stuff. In organizations, it's more like building automation.
Cameras and...
Cameras. Yeah, I've been surprised a few times where I'm like, oh, man. I found a system, and we're like, oh, there's an exploit for the system. And then we find out it was reporting the wrong information because I browsed to the URL, and I was greeted with a bunch of IP cameras. So I was looking at the parking lot and all that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, this is nice. So I told them, hey, look, I can just look at the camera, and on the left side it has a button where you can pan, tilt, and zoom. So I started pan, tilting, and zooming in the parking lot of the office building. And I'm like, we went to we told their security folks, we're like, yeah, whoever, and they're like, well, we just got this set up a few weeks ago. This company came out and set it up, and we're like, yeah, they didn't set any username and password, and it has an option that says set username and password at minimum, right? Well, the better approach is to put it on a different network, not your production network, but whoever did it obviously did a good job. But that's the idea, is that look around, and you never know. It's not all about popping boxes, That's a phrase people say.
Since we're on that, right now, IoT botnets are taking down everything.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have a camera, baby cam, any of those things, check if you haven't updated your password. That's a public service announcement. Because you could, even if it doesn't affect you, you could be affecting the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's a great point to make. I see a lot of people that go to the store and they buy this fancy doorbell. All right, and it comes with a built-in default username and password, and it tells you it's so easy. Just hook it up to my wireless, right? Okay, you don't even start sniffing traffic on the network to see what is it doing. You're just trusting it, right? You find out there's a default username and password that you didn't even know about. Now, it's being exploited remotely, and it's part of a botnet that's now sending ping requests to a DNS server. It then takes down the East Coast DNS server. Right? So this is a great example. Please be aware. Or garage door openers. Oh, we can connect Wi-Fi, so I can use a stupid app to remotely open my door. No, right? Or my thermostat, because when I'm here, I really want to change the temperature at my house. Not really. I don't care for that. I don't want to. So Kali Linux. Kali Linux. What is Kali Linux? It is a Debian-based distribution created by the friendly people over at Offensive Security. This is an open source penetration testing tool, framework, operating system, and it has a variety of tools. There are other distributions, but I can't guarantee how good they are. I've tried a few, and it's you turn it on, and it's shuts off. It's all right, yeah. You think some of you guys are having a hard time booting off of Kali? Try using some of these other distributions. You're going to be in for a punch. But it contains several hundreds of tools, and you're not going to be a master of all these tools. You might be a master at a few of them, but it's going to be a great learning opportunity. If you have never used Linux, it'll be fun. If you have used Linux, it'll still be fun, especially when you run a particular tool and it's and it gives you this random text on the screen. You're like, what in the world is this? And you're just like, it's like kernel debug error 5 Etsy. What does that mean? You Google, and then it takes you to some random forum, and these people are just as foolish as you. And they say, oh, run this command. You run it, and it makes situations worse.
But I look for the ones that says solve.
Oh, yeah, they say solved, and at the end, it's like, thread has been closed, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's like, oh, you're so helpful.
But I've been lucky so far. With the ones
So, for anyone who's never seen Cali, many of you have, so it's like his Cali too. But enough of that. So, we're going to spend the next 40 minutes, I hope, solving everybody's problem as far as booting off a live DVD once, or 15 minutes. Once everybody is in a live DVD and is getting and is able to browse to this URL or this IP address, then we'll try to walk through an actual penetration test. I have the same systems. I will turn on a whole bunch of systems, and I'll give everybody cards. And the objective is hack those systems. Hack those two systems. You got a Linux and a Windows system. We're going to start with the easier one, which is it's not easy, but it's relatively less steps. Is the Linux system, and then we're going to move on to a Windows system. So does that, anyone have any questions? Sorry, I know I didn't ask if anyone has questions. But
How do you get a job doing this?
so that's actually a hard one. I didn't think I'd get a job when I first, because I was a sysadmin, so I wasn't doing pen testing. But the idea that I found was I was able to initially apply for a junior role, and during the interview, they're like, "Why should we hire you? Because you've never done pen testing before." And I'm like, "Well, I've been a sysadmin, and this is what I'm interested in doing, and this is what I do in my spare time." Right? So then and I was going to school at the same time, and then they were like, "Oh, wow, all this stuff that you do on your own time that's not work-related, even though you're a sysadmin, we're going to hire you." So the idea is, even during interviews, when I interview people, I don't care if you have a degree, honestly. If you don't have a degree, that's okay. Usually the best are those that do not have a degree. But you have to have the passion to do this, and on your spare time, you have to at least know Linux and at least start operating with it. And if any of you guys are still students, please master Linux at minimum. Linux and Windows, it will help you a lot, because if you can go in an interview and say, yeah, I've used Linux, I've used these distros, I've done this at home, I've set this up, I've done all that, then it's going to be very helpful. A lot of the stuff that I've built here, I've built it on my own just because I've had an interest to learn. I haven't formally learned it at work or anything like that. But it's important on your own time, do all that, and stay active in the community, go to conferences, right? Meet people. You never know who you're going to know. And, just try to keep your skills up to date, even if you're not working there. And then you can apply for a junior role. Look for anything, even if you have to work at a SOC as an analyst. And let's say you have zero IT experience, get that SOC analyst job and move up. Because that stuff, if you worked at a SOC or whatever, and you have those at least basic security skills, that translates over to pen testing, because now you're like, all right, I know what the SOC is looking for, so I can try to go under the radar. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Right, so that's an excellent point. There are many CTFs that are out there. Some are bizarre, but that's really the part of the point. Very bizarre CTFs that are out there. Get involved with all of that.
How do you keep track of the threat landscape? What web pages do you like to go to that keep track of the threats that are currently out there? 0 days,
Yeah, so the SANS internet storm center. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, for me personally, there's just way too many. What can I list? I mean, there's just way too many. I mean, I'll start looking at, MITRE has a site where they list CVEs and all that. You go there and they will, just search for MITRE CVE. I forgot what was the site, but you go there and it will list any publicly disclosed CVEs, who reported, all that stuff. You can start from there. That doesn't necessarily talk about the threat landscape. I usually try to get away from those CNN or whatever articles where it's oh, there's these hackers. It's
that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. So I'll look at the CVEs, and I'll also go to so it's not anything specific, but all these different vendors that create AV or do, whether they do pen testing or they do anything else, they all have, if it's a vulnerability scanner, whatever company, they have like a blog post where their researchers actually say, oh, we discovered this piece of malware on the, so just search, for example, Symantec, right? And then you'll find, blog posting where their researchers are talking about something they found. Wow, I've usually found better luck with that kind of stuff as opposed to the NBC or whatever kind of stuff.
The U.S. cert and registered for summary.
Yeah, US CERT is a great resource. So a lot of government agencies have. FBI has a website where you can register. They'll send you email so that you can at least know, oh, this thing is reported as fraud, or there's this type of attack that's going on. Very helpful information for you to be aware of the threat landscape. The more you know of the threat landscape, the better you can prepare yourself. You're like, okay, especially if you're meeting with customers, like, okay, I want you guys to then make the real one. And they're like, I don't know what you guys are going to do, tell me. And you have to be able to speak. And, especially if you go into an interview. If you go into an interview and start talking about this stuff, you can really wow the person. Because, like, I've interviewed people, they come in, and I ask them, so I ask open-ended questions. I don't ask anything, that has a straight answer. I don't ask anything ridiculous. Like, what's your business? I don't care. But I'll ask stuff like, so can you tell me something recent that's happened? And if they look at me like, I said, oh, okay, next question. Can we ask this about your resume? All right, thank you. It's been good. So be knowledgeable about all this stuff, because if you're looking for a job to do this kind of stuff, you can speak the language and be honest. I know this isn't like a job coaching class, but be honest and tell them, hey, I don't know this. That's okay. I've had people come to me and they're like, yeah, I found a public one guy, he was like, I created an exploit for Google. I'm like, what? Okay. I was like, did you properly disclose the exploit? And he was like, I was like, oh, okay, that's problem number one. But tell me about this exploit. He was like, well, just give you access. I was like, all right. Next question. But yeah, don't try to fool around with the person interviewing you. It's like, I think they thought I was a manager, not a manager. I was just told to go into and interview the person. So they started trying to fool around, and I'm like, no, doesn't work.
I know the word.
Tell them what you know, tell them what you don't know, go from there, and you guys can get a job, hopefully. Just keep trying. Eventually, it will happen. I never gave up, and I got a job. And it does not matter. I know some people they talk about gender and stuff like that. Regardless if you're female, keep trying. Don't let people say, oh, well, you're not that good in the technical world. Keep trying. I met many females that are phenomenal and way better than male counterparts that I've met. So,
Many times you have to know people looking at to not get overlooked. Because I dealt with the overlooking multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, and then you might run across that, and if you do,
you don't quit. You just keep going. And keep
move on to the next one. If they don't want to hire you, they're not going to say that. That's the reason why they're hiring you. If they look at your technical and say, oh, you don't have technical skills, whatever, just move on to the next one. And you will find someone. I've worked with many females. They're great. They do a better job than the males.
They're really good at everything.
They're good at everything. They're good at writing reports. They're good at actually following instructions. I've had problems, in the past with males, but yeah, keep trying. So that's that. So the idea is we'd off of the Cali Live DVD, and then I'm going to give you cards. So I'm going to pass around some cards and have 2 IP addresses. Please don't do anything to use only those 2 IP addresses. If the directions say 192.168.2.40, don't start pinging that. Use whatever I assign you. We're going to start with the Linux system, which is hopefully a little bit easier. I'm going to try to demonstrate it on the screen, and I want you guys to kind of follow along. I put the answers on that web page that I have locally. That's kind of walking you through. So, like, if you lose me, that's okay. Look at that page. I would prefer no one to stop me and say, well, hold on, what was that you ran? Because, like, you'll see once you're going through it, it's very hard to start going back, and then you'll notice certain things will not work because certain exploits or certain things that you're doing are very flaky, just like the real world, where you have to get it at the right time. So I have the instructions if anyone needs some elaboration And I encourage everybody to help each other. So if you get something that the person next to you does not get, just be friendly and help them. If you want to connect wirelessly, you can use this SSID, and then that's the very advanced password. Yeah, good luck cracking that. But so I'll give you guys like 15 minutes. If you're already good and up and running, you can take a break if you want. If you're not good, question.
That's not good.
Oh, okay, we're done. If you're not good, then we can keep troubleshooting and figure out what we're going to do.
How long are you going to wait for it?
About 15 minutes. Well, for those who are good, you actually can be my volunteer.
Okay.
Are you good with your system? Okay.
You help me.
Sure, sure. So you can
because I got a long drive, so as soon as I get